Hello, and welcome to Evidence Guidelines for Listed Medicines, Information Session 1, Overview. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I would also like to extend that acknowledgement and my respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. The purpose of this session is to help sponsors understand how to use the Listed Medicines Evidence Guidelines so that they can compile a robust evidence package that supports the efficacy of their listed medicine. Having a robust evidence package will help achieve a favourable outcome for a listed medicine if it is selected for a TGA efficacy compliance review. I'd like to point out that although the evidence guidelines are not mandatory requirements, they do show sponsors the things that a TGA delegate considers when conducting a compliance review. Sponsors may choose to generate their own scientific evidence for their medicine, that is, conduct a clinical trial on their unique formulation, or they may choose to rely on existing published literature. Most commonly, evidence packages for listed medicines are based on published literature. Therefore, the evidence guidelines are primarily focused on evidence packages that are based on published literature. The evidence guidelines are structured to provide a step-by-step process to assist sponsors to find evidence, critically assess the evidence, select indications based on evidence, and present that evidence. This structure is based on the scenario where a sponsor first selects a research question, then researches the evidence landscape, and then selects therapeutic indications based on the evidence they find. However, it is possible to follow the guidelines in a different order. For example, a sponsor may choose to first select the indications for their medicine and then survey the evidence landscape. I'll now go through each of the sections of the guidelines in more detail. Section 1 of the guidelines is a general introduction. It outlines the purpose of the guidelines and provides the legal responsibilities of a sponsor in relation to holding evidence that demonstrates the efficacy of their listed medicine. It also explains when and how the TGA reviews the efficacy of listed medicines. Under the regulatory framework, listed medicines are not pre-market evaluated by the TGA for quality, safety, and efficacy. Instead, they are automatically included in the Australian Register of Therapeutic Goods based on a certification by the sponsor, who's the product owner, that their medicine meets all the applicable legislative requirements in relation to safety, quality, and efficacy. Regulatory requirements for listing include that the sponsor holds appropriate evidence to substantiate the indications and can demonstrate that the efficacy of the medicine is acceptable. The overall purpose of an evidence package is for the sponsor to demonstrate to the TGA that their medicine will do what the medicine's indications say it will do. That is, that the medicine is efficacious. The evidence guidelines set out the factors that the TGA considers when assessing if the efficacy of a listed medicine is acceptable. They provide a roadmap to help sponsors put together a robust evidence package. Under the Therapeutic Goods Act, sponsors make a number of certifications when they list their medicine. This includes that they hold evidence to support all indications and comply with all requirements for those indications, that they hold evidence to support any claims made for the medicine, and that they must, at all times, while the medicine remains listed, hold information or evidence that supports the indications. The TGA can cancel medicine from the ATG if the sponsor's certifications are found to be incorrect, or if the efficacy of the medicine appears to be unacceptable. If the medicine is cancelled from the ATG, in general, it can no longer be imported, manufactured, or exported from Australia by the sponsor. For the purpose of the evidence guidelines, we've defined efficacy as the capacity of a medicine to produce a therapeutic effect. That is, that the medicine will do what its indications say it will do. We expect medicines to work as described by its indications. Whether a medicine relies on scientific evidence, sources, or evidence of traditional use is important in this context. The emphasis is that the medicine will do what the indications say it will do, whether the evidence base is traditional or scientific. So a medicine using a permitted traditional indication must have evidence of traditional use in the specified paradigm. For scientific indications, efficacy is supported by scientific evidence, such as clinical studies or systematic reviews. The TGA can review a medicine at any time it is listed in the ARTG. We conduct random and targeted post-market compliance reviews of listed medicines on an ongoing basis. During an efficacy review, the key questions we consider include, but are not limited to, what therapeutic effect is described by the indication? On what basis can it be concluded that the medicine will result in a therapeutic effect? What is the reason for this conclusion? And is the above conclusion based on data or information that we have confidence in to be true and accurate? Since these are important questions being considered by the TGA when reviewing efficacy, it is a good idea for sponsors to consider these questions when critically analysing your evidence. Section 2 of the Evidence Guidelines provides guidance on how to conduct and document a literature search. It outlines the different types of evidence, such as evidence of traditional use and scientific evidence. Evidence of traditional use is based on an extensive history of use in a specific paradigm. This history underpins the safe use of these medicines in a traditional setting. The use of many traditional medicines is well documented in pharmacopoeia, monographs, materia medica, etc. Scientific evidence refers to the quantifiable data and usually includes reports on clinical trials in humans, animal studies, or pharmacological studies. The guidance also provides links to NHMRC guidelines that can be an additional information source. Section 2 provides guidance on how to conduct a literature search using search methodology, and when to conduct a non-systematic literature search and what to document. This is to ensure that a balanced view of the evidence landscape is obtained and considered by sponsors. It's important to note that the TGA does not require sponsors to undertake a particular search strategy for listed medicines. It is up to the sponsor to consider what type of literature search is most appropriate for their circumstance. Evidence Guidelines Section 3 is on how to assess evidence. It provides guidance on how to determine if the evidence you have found is relevant to your medicine and of good quality. Once you weigh up the relevance and quality of an evidence source, you can consider it in the context of the body of evidence holistically. While this section is more focused on assessing individual evidence sources, it is also important to consider how each evidence source contributes to your evidence package as a whole. There are a range of factors that influence a medicine's efficacy, such as ingredient, dose, and method of preparation. It is important that the evidence source should be specific to each of these factors. The evidence guidelines includes a decision tree to help determine the relevance of an evidence source to your medicine. Where you have an evidence source that does not match all of these factors, additional justification should be included in your evidence package. A justification can be the provision of a written explanation to show how the evidence can be reasonably extrapolated to your medicine. You could also provide other evidence sources that address any data gaps. Scientific evidence sources can be categorized into a hierarchy based on how much the source is impacted by bias. Each source of evidence should be assessed to determine if it is of sufficient quality. In this context, quality means how confident you can be that the therapeutic effect described in an evidence source is correct. While scientific evidence sources can be categorized into hierarchy based on how much the source is impacted by bias, in contrast, traditional evidence sources do not have a hierarchy based on bias. You can see that we've given a hierarchy source of category A, category B, and category C. Certain sources of scientific evidence provide a lower risk of bias than others due to their design, methodology, or level of review. When designed and implemented appropriately, double-blinded randomized controlled trials and systematic reviews of multiple randomized controlled trials are the most likely to achieve low bias and high precision when studying treatment effects. Conversely, if a randomized controlled trial is not appropriately designed and implemented, the results generated may not be robust and reliable. It is important to note that the hierarchy should not be used in place of conducting your own assessment of the quality and relevance of your evidence sources. The guidelines also include a number of links to other resources and tools that can give more detailed guidance on assessing quality. Evidence Guidelines Section 4 shows how to use evidence. This describes the different types of claims and indications and what kinds of evidence are required to support them. Indication is defined in the Act as a specific therapeutic use of the medicine. Conversely, a claim is a statement that does not describe a therapeutic use. Claims still need to be supported by evidence, but they're not required to be included in the ARTG entry. However, it is important to note that claims that imply therapeutic uses are assessed as indications, and a similar indication should be included in the ARTG entry for that implied therapeutic use. Listed medicines may only use low-level indications that are included in the permissible indications determination. The types of indications they can make are general health maintenance, health enhancement, prevention of dietary deficiency, or benefit for a non-serious form of a disease or a condition. It's important to note that low-level indications may not refer or imply the prevention, cure, alleviation of any disease, ailment, defect, or injury. We classify indications into different types based on the evidence that is used to demonstrate efficacy. Scientific indications are based on scientific evidence, and traditional indications are based on evidence of traditional use. Scientific indications are further categorized into specific or non-specific indications. This classification system is a means to determine when it is acceptable for sponsors to hold a lower level of evidence. While we recognise all permitted indications are low level, there are some that go beyond general health maintenance, and we would expect a slightly higher level of evidence to support them. Non-specific indications for listed medicines refer to general health and well-being. The types of non-specific indications are health maintenance, relief of general symptoms, and general vitamin, mineral, nutritional supplementation that imply a general health benefit. The evidence requirements for medicines with traditional indications is the same whether the indication is specific or non-specific. As such, this classification system is not used for traditional indications. Specific indications are indications that go beyond maintaining general health and well-being. These indications include health enhancement, reduction of occurrence or frequency of a condition or symptoms, discrete event or named condition, relief of symptoms linked to a named condition, disease or disorder, and nutritional supplementation that restore, correct or modify a physiological or mental process, function or state. The evidence guidelines include a tool to assist with the process of classifying indications as specific or non-specific. We've included several explained examples in the guidelines to assist sponsors in using the tool. The tool is intended to increase the consistency of indication classification. However, there may be some indications that are difficult to categorise for individual medicines. The decision tool and examples will be discussed in more detail in session 2. For different types of indications, we have different expectations for the minimum level and what type of evidence is required to support efficacy. This table summarises the evidence requirements for traditional indications. This indicates that minimum of 2 from these sources is required, but keep in mind that you should assess all evidence sources for quality and relevance. Depending on the quality, relevance assessment, additional sources may be needed or justification provided to cover any information gaps. The next table summarises the minimum evidence requirements for scientific indications. There are different requirements for non-specific and specific indications. These are general minimum evidence requirements, which may not necessarily be sufficient in all cases. Again, you need to assess quality and relevance for each source and consider whether you need to include a justification or additional evidence sources. The guidelines provide some more detail about vitamin, mineral, and nutrient supplementation. Supplementation claims convey that by consuming the medicine, a consumer will ingest additional vitamin, mineral, or nutrient than otherwise ingested from dietary sources alone. These do not describe a therapeutic use or effect, and they therefore are not included in the ATG. The minimum evidence requirement for supplementation claim is that the medicine provides at least 25% RDI, which is recommended daily intake, for the nutrient, and it is in a form able to be absorbed by the body. Additionally, the medicine must also have at least one permissible indication in the ATG entry and label. This is because for a medicine to be included in the ATG, there needs to be at least one permissible indication. All scientific indications that refer to the effect of a stated vitamin, mineral, or nutrient are categorized as specific or non-specific using the same principles as for any other scientific indication. We have provided 2 exceptions to this, and these have special evidence requirements. For these, the medicine, they're listed underneath, maintain support state vitamin, mineral, nutrient levels in the body, or maintain support vitamin, mineral within normal range. For these, the medicine must provide at least 25% RDI of a nutrient in a form absorbed by the body. In addition, when used on a medicine label, there should be a label statement that they can only be of assistance if dietary intake is inadequate. The rationale for these special evidence requirements is that a consumer is likely to have a similar expectation for these indications as for a similar supplementation claim. Therefore, these particular indications have similar evidence requirements for supplementation claims. We also have biomarker indications in the permitted indications determinations. Permitted indications for listed medicines can only use low-level biomarker indications relating to general health. These are help maintain support healthy blood sugar glucose and helps maintain support healthy cholesterol. Indications for listed medicines generally should only target healthy individuals with biomarker levels that lie within the normal healthy range. Because of the way the permissible biomarker indications are worded, these indications are classified as non-specific. Section 5 shows how to present your evidence. It provides guidance on how to document and present your critical appraisal of the evidence, including providing justifications where appropriate. The purpose of a critical appraisal is to demonstrate that the sponsor's conclusion of their medicine's efficacy is logical, reasonable, and based on data we have confidence in to be true and accurate. Having a strong and clear narrative or critical appraisal that draws the body of evidence together is very important in the evidence package to ensure that you can demonstrate to the TGA that the efficacy of your medicine is acceptable. This is especially important where there are gaps and or discrepancies between the evidence sources you elect to include in your evidence package compared to the design formulation of your medicine. A critical appraisal should be focused on evidence sources that are most relevant to the research question and are of high quality. Avoid relying on irrelevant or weak evidence sources. Distinguish evidence from opinion, assumptions, misreporting, and belief. Assess the validity of the results and conclusions in the relevant literature. Assess the impact of competing data sets and assess the impact of any potential for bias. If you find that you don't have a convincing argument, you should reconsider the design of your medicine, such as the indication, dose, target, or population. Justifications may be needed when you rely on evidence sources that may be missing critical pieces of information, may not perfectly match your medicine, may be subject to significant bias or confounding, are from an evidence landscape mixed with positive and negative findings. Holding several of the above sources that meet the relevance and quality criteria when combined may help strengthen arguments to support your conclusion. You may not always need to provide a detailed critical appraisal. It can be quite simple depending on your circumstances. The guidelines refer to sponsors needing to consider the balance of evidence and provide justifications for any data discrepancies. There will be individual circumstances for each listed medicine, and the critical appraisal is your opportunity to provide a clear explanation for why you consider your medicine will work as described by its indications. To assist understanding and use of the guidance, we have provided a number of hypothetical case studies in Appendix 2. There's also a detailed example of a literature search showing both systematic and non-systematic search strategies and how best practice way to document the searches. That's included in Appendix 3. And that's the conclusion of session 1. Thank you very much for your attention.
All right, thank you for that, Diane. So for this second part of this evidence guidelines information session, I'll be going over some details into how to use the decision tool. So as Diane has mentioned, this decision tool is designed so that it can specify exactly how to categorize each of the permissible indications into specific or non-specific. So before I go into more details, I'd like to point out that the indications here in this have to be taken at face value. So in other words, the presentation or the context of the indications in which they are presented are not considered when using this tool, as it's not possible to capture all those nuances. So if you actually look at the tool, you'll realize that there are 4 main questions outlined in these 4 green boxes. And each of these questions, you have a yes or no answer to them. And outside these boxes, you have these permissible indications to show that how each of these indications were answered to each of these questions. And if you look closer, you'll see that some of these indications are bolded, and that means that these bolded indications have been explained further in the evidence guidelines in pages 46 to 48. So the tool can be broken down into 2 major parts. So the first part is the first question, and it can be considered to be the hardest part of the tool. And the thought processes in how to answer this question will be outlined in the next slides. And the second and third and fourth question, overall, in general, what this is trying to achieve is that it tries to filter out the indications that refer to a single symptom, which is not connected to a condition. And as condition, we define it by a set of signs and symptoms. So these indications which we have filtered out, there would generally be indications which refer to the relief of general symptoms only, and that will turn into a non-specific indication. So the first question here is the indication represented to restore, correct, or modify, which means to increase or decrease a physiological or mental process functional state? So if you break it down, it is essentially asking you, is it restoring, correcting, or changing something. And if it's helpful for you, you can actually simple it down further into asking yourself, is it actually changing something in the body? And I'll go through some examples here to help you understand this a bit further. So for the first example, maintain supports intestinal health. If you think about the question, is it actually changing something in the body? And when you think through it, it is not changing anything specific in the body. And it's actually just maintaining the intestinal health the person already has. So when you follow the arrow through on the right hand side to answer this question no, you would end up this indication being non-specific. For the next example, analgesic or relief pain. So when you think about this, it is decreasing something, which is pain. And how this is done is that it can go through the physiological pathway in which it can decrease or inhibit proteins and enzymes involved in this pain processes in the body. So essentially, when you're decreasing something, and you go back to what the original question is asking, it is essentially modifying or decreasing physiological process. And in this case, you would answer yes to this question. So you'll go to the next question. So the second question is, does the indication explicitly refer to symptoms of or reduced occurrence of? And this is a pretty much much simpler question. So example we have here is decrease, reduce, relieve symptoms of dehydration. So does this indication have the words in there? And the answer is yes, it has the words symptoms of. Therefore, this will be classified to be specific indication because when you go out to the right-hand side of this box, this goes straight into the specific box. So for the second example, helps reduce occurrence of symptoms of mild allergies. And again, this indication has both of these words. So it will also be categorized as specific indication. So what about analgesic and or relief pain? This indication does not refer to any of these words specifically. So you would have to go to the next question. So for the third question, does the indication suggest an action of relief? So essentially it's asking you, is it relieving something? So when you go to the first example, analgesic or relief pain, the answer is yes, because it refers to the relief, and that is the relief of pain. For the second example, helps enhance or promotes body energy reserves. If you look at the indication itself, it has nothing to do with relieving. So in this case, you would go towards answering no to this question, therefore turns out to be a specific indication. So for the next example, decrease, reduce hair loss or thinning. This one is a little bit more tricky. So you have to think more carefully about if you replace the words decrease and reduce and replace it with the word relief in there, do you think the indication still makes sense? So essentially be relieving hair loss or thinning. And when you think about it carefully, it does not really make sense. So the answer to this one would be no. It would not be national relief. And it turns out to be a specific indication. And for our last example there, decrease, reduce ear irritation or inflammation. You can replace those words again, decrease or reduce, with relief to see if it makes sense. And in this case, when you say relieving ear irritation or inflammation, it does make sense. Therefore, you just go to the next question for this case. So as to the final question, does the indication refer only to a single symptom or sign? In other words, can you determine what condition it is referring to solely by the symptom or sign? And if you're not very sure of whether it is only talking about a single symptom, you can break it down to see whether you can break the single symptom into more or multiple symptoms or signs. Because if you can, that would not be considered to be a single symptom, as the word condition is defined as a characteristic set of signs and symptoms. So when you go to the example, decrease, reduce, relieve, diarrhea. Diarrhea is a bit more difficult in this case. You might think that it is a single symptom, but when you think more carefully about what it constitutes, it can be separated out into a set of symptoms. And those separate symptoms would be loose or watery stools, frequent stools, which also includes abdominal cramps and pain. Therefore, this indication would be considered to be specific because it answered no to this question. So what about analgesic or relief pain? Pain is a single symptom and a condition cannot be deducted from it. So in this case, this will be answered yes to this question. And as this is the final question, this will be categorized into non-specific indication. So let's go through one final example, going through each of these questions altogether. So what about relieve itchy eyes? Is it essentially restoring, correcting, or changing something? And the answer to this question would be yes. It is decreasing the itchiness of the eye. Therefore, you'll go down to the next question. Does the indication explicitly refer to symptoms of or reduced occurrence of? And this one's simple. It's not talking about any of those words. So you answer no to this question and go to the next question. Is it relieving something? And in this case, yes, it is relieving itchy eyes. So go to the next question. Is it referring only to a single symptom or sign? Or can you tell that what condition it is simply from this single symptom or sign? The answer is yes, because it is referring only to a single symptom or sign. So as you cannot also determine what condition it is from the single symptom, this will be considered to be a non-specific indication. I would like to point out here that you must be extra careful in how these indications are presented, especially when you are combining multiple non-specific indications, such as these four lists here. So individually, these may be considered to be non-specific indications, which only refer to a single symptom or sign. However, when you are combining these, it may be presented in a way that's implying a condition. And the condition here it's implying may be considered to be symptoms of hay fever. So make sure that the overall presentation, when you're doing that, you keep in mind that a condition is not being applied. So in the case where the overall presentation, you are implying a condition, this is when that it is expected that you include a parent indication that links these individual symptoms to a condition in the RTG entry. And further on for that, the parent indications, they are generally considered to be specific indications as they are referring to a named disease or condition. So therefore, you'll need to have specific level of evidence for the parent indication, which supports each of these linked single symptoms. If your advertised indications implies a condition, by combining those symptom-based indications, you may be changing the meaning intent of the indication. And by advertising the indication that is changed in meaning and intent, it may be considered to be advertising an indication not in the ARTG entry, which is a legislative breach. This is why how these individual non-specific indications are used and how they're presented is particularly important. And it's something that this tool cannot take into consideration given the complexity of the matter. Please be aware that combining indications isn't the only way the meaning intent of the indication may be changed. And this can also be done through the way the indication is presented. Hence, this is a reason why indications are taken at face value when using this tool, as it cannot capture all those other factors. But those other factors are also taken into account and consideration in a compliance review. So this finalizes this portion of the tutorial. I hope this has helped you a little bit on how to use a tool, and thank you for listening.